Bob, are you gonna put Jamie on the screen?
Right, are we live now?
We're live.
Excellent.
Jamie has to say something, so Zoom will pick her up.
Jamie, can you hear us okay?
Hold on.
There was quite a reverb,
There
but
she
I
is.
could hear it.
You can mute yours.
I'm just gonna get off.
But then she can't hear us if we get off. Isn't that the issue?
Jamie, you can hear
No,
us.
she
right?
can't.
Oh, you definitely gotta get off.
Okay, there we go.
All right.
We can't hear her. She seems to be talking.
Yep, are you muted, Jamie, or can you hear us? Okay, we can hear you, but Bob, is it possible to turn the volume up, because I don't think that'll get heard very easily. Okay. You wanna try again, Jamie? Very, very faintly. Okay, that's as high as Bob says he can go. I don't know what can we do to, I don't think we've had that problem before.
No, people
What have
are
we-
usually fine there.
All right, so we will use our very best listening ears, and if there are things that don't get picked up by the mic, I don't know if, there's a mic that is out over the audience area, correct, Bob?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so you can hear her okay through the studio?
For some reason, it's not coming out on our speakers.
Okay,
I can hear her in here.
Maybe just repeat what she says.
okay, so I'll repeat what you say for the people here at the table. It sounds like you're being picked up perfectly fine for the recording, and for the broadcast for people who are not here in the studio. All right. Okay. All right, so we can go ahead and start. Good evening and welcome to the Hopkinton School Committee's Thursday, June 20th, 2024 meeting of the school committee. The meeting is both live and it is being recorded by HCAM, so thank you to HCAM. We will rise now, those who are here in the audience, for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so we will jump right in. Just for folks who are following along with the agenda at home, we are not going to be needing to have an executive session tonight, so we're gonna pass over that for now. And we can go into public comment. I do not see anybody here for public comment, unless there's somebody that wanted to have a dual role and make a public comment as well. All right, are there any recognitions? I'm looking just to make sure Jamie's not saying anything. Okay. Just want to recognize all the staff and the teachers, the administrators, the students, and the families for finishing out strong and on a very warm last day of school. So, all right, that brings us into reports. Dr. Kavanaugh, we get the superintendent's report first.
Thank you. So this will be a very brief superintendent's report. I just wanted to make sure people are aware that this summer, things will be just a little bit different in the Hopkinton Public Schools and the central office. Our schools will be open daily from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. If for some reason you have to go to one of the buildings, you really should make an appointment if you want to go there and see someone who is a specific person. And just to make sure that that person will be in on that day, during the summertime, very frequently our administrators or, a lot of our administrative staff will be off on vacation. So just make sure that you call ahead if there's someone that you think you need to see very specifically. At central office, we are only offering remote access from this point through at least July 8th. If you haven't been past the central office yet, you will see that we are undergoing some major exterior renovations. So for example, there will be roof replacement, all new siding, parking lot pavement, granite berms being installed, and landscaping upgrades. And so they have asked us to leave the building through July 8th. If there is someone who needs some in-person service, certainly we can meet with you in one of the school buildings. So just reach out. We are happy to give you the good service we typically do. You'll just need to make an appointment to do that because our usual walk-in service is non-existent right now. I thought I would take just a couple of pictures of what it's looking like today. So it's only been 2 days, but they are really getting underway. You can see that they've already removed a lot of the siding. The solar panels have been removed from the roof.
Wow.
Yeah,
That was fast.
yeah, it's going to be,
Are they gonna keep it the same color?
I think, so they're building, the person who owns our building is building another structure adjacent right next door to us. And so I think his goal is to get this to look like the other building will look, so they'll look like sort of sister buildings.
School doesn't obviously own the building.
That's correct, yes.
Which then, I'm assuming means that we are not paying the cost of the
That
renovations.
is also correct,
Yeah.
yes. I'm
Very
sure
good.
that the taxpayers would like to know that. And that's all. I'm just wishing everyone a wonderful, restful, and rejuvenating summer. It's been a
Thank you.
really great school year, I think.
Are there any questions on Dr. Kavanaugh's report? I'm gonna start down with Jamie. Just, do you have any questions? Okay. Anybody else?
No.
Okay. Thank you. That brings us then into the school committee chair report. Just briefly, payroll warrants S24024, S24224B, and S24025 have been approved. Warrants 24-080S and 24-081S have been approved and have been included in your packet. The other thing, just in terms of communication, we did receive 2 emails in support of the gun storage resolution that we had discussed and had the very well-organized and informative presentation at our last meeting. Just because we haven't divided up liaison reports, I'm assuming there are not any, unless you have any from outstanding from.
Susan will have a lot more, but the adaptive playground committee is just going full tilt, which is good.
When I click on the packet link in the email,
Yep.
it takes me to the agenda.
Okay, there should be if you go in through, because I access it differently, but if you go in through into the drive, there should be a folder
Okay,
that has all the supporting materials.
gotcha. Okay, I'll find it.
Chris, I think I can see you in the agenda, and I think all of those links in there are live.
But the,
Oh, I was going through the link in the body of the email, so the link in the agenda
Yes.
can take me to the pack. I got you.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
but there are sometimes additional things that go into the folder for us that are not
Yes,
in the
that's
full
right.
packet as well.
Absolutely, yes.
Gotcha.
Okay, so then, do we want to take out of order, since we have, is there one more person coming from?
Yes.
Okay, then we won't take it out of order then. Let's go into the HEF grant
So
donation.
I think Chris Fredericks is coming.
Okay, then just
tonight, so-
joking about that. Let's go into the
Wanna go to paraprofessionals?
paraprofessional.
All right, that sounds good. All right, so the paraprofessional request is, it's pretty simple. Matt Cotter, who is the principal at the Hopkins School, is requesting that he's able to reduce a 1.0 A paraprofessional, and those are the ones who are general education paraprofessionals, not special education paraprofessionals. And instead of having an A paraprofessional, he would like to take that position and sort of translate it to a B paraprofessional position. The differential is about $4,000, and the goal here is so that each one of the moderate learning specialist teachers will have a B paraprofessional that's almost sort of exclusively theirs to work on a particular PLC or National Parks team. So that's what he's asking for your permission to do, is to eliminate an A para position and assume a B para position.
It's an upgrade and support.
It is,
Okay.
yes.
Will that A position need to be filled later?
It will not, yeah,
Okay, it's not needed right now.
correct.
Okay.
All right, Jamie, do you have any questions on that? Okay. All right, then if there are no other questions, I would seek a motion on that.
I move to reduce the 1.0 FTE A paraprofessional position and add a 1.0 FTE B paraprofessional position at Hopkins for fiscal year '25.
Second.
Motion by Susan, second by Chris. We'll do a roll call vote since we do have a remote member. We'll start with you.
Yes.
Chris, Susan?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Jamie? Okay, and Jamie is also a yes. Okay, so do we want to then move into the Adaptive Playground Designer Board?
We can do that.
Is that okay?
Thank you. So in May, the May town meeting approved the use of community preservation funds for the engineering study, design, and construction bid documents for an inclusive,
Presented on
um,
there? No?
doesn't need to be.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Thank you, though. For an inclusive playground in the amount of $100,000. So that is the grant that was given to us for this project. So the first step in the process is a procurement of a designer for the project. The Adaptive Playground Committee will select the highest ranked designer on June 17th, which has happened. Following the designer selection policy, the school committee needs to request of the select board to delegate that authority to the school committee for projects with an estimated construction cost under $500,000 or the design fee associated with the project is under $50,000. The design fee probably will be above $50,000, however, the cost of construction still has not been established. So following this policy, I think it is prudent for the school committee to request that delegation of authorization to the school committee. The designer selection board shall be the Adaptive Playground Committee, comprised of the following: the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations, the Director of Student Services, a school committee member, 2 parent representatives, a CPAC representative, a member from the Commission of Disability, the director of Hopkinton Park and Rec, the director of Hopkinton Department of Public Works, and 3 student representatives.
3 student representatives. That's
3.
great.
Mm-hmm.
And that group has met in some way.
So the further memo, if you would like, we can do these together. So the committee has met 4 times, and they have discussed the goals of the adaptive playground. This covered potential locations of the playground, identifying the customers and the times they are available for use, the aspects of an adaptive playground that serves in the best interest of the playground committee's goals. And all this information will be shared with the designer. An RFP was sent out for the designer services on May 15th with proposals due on June 5th. There were 14 vendors that requested the bid document, and we received 3 proposals. 1 proposal was deemed unresponsive for not meeting the minimum qualifications defined in the RFP. The committee has evaluated the remaining 2 proposals and conducted interviews. We are at the point where the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations will conduct fee negotiations after we are able to establish that delegation. So the upcoming tasks for tonight is for the school committee to accept the CPC grant, approve seeking permission from the select board under the designer selection policy. July 9th, we would bring that request to the select board. That is their next meeting. And then on July 11th, I will provide for the school committee the negotiated fee with that designer for the school committee's approval. And I have had communication with CPC. Their next meeting is not until July 25th, but the chair of the CPC will accept the budget, which would be the accepted fee from the school committee prior to their July 25th meeting. That way we can give the designer a notice to proceed. So that's kind of a lot. Several pieces to that.
Let's break that down, I think, by motion, if that's okay, and start with the motion to request the Board of Selectmen. The select board to delegate authority to the school committee to appoint appropriate individuals to serve on the designer selection board for this project.
So moved.
Motion by Susan. Second.
Second.
Second by Chris. We'll do a roll call starting with you, Chris.
Yes.
Susan.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Jamie? And Jamie is also a yes. Okay, so the second piece is the CPC grant.
Correct.
And so, is there somebody who would like to make the motion for that?
I move to accept the CPC grant for $100,000 for the Inclusive Playground Engineering Study.
Okay, motion by Susan,
Second.
second by Chris. We'll start with you, Chris.
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Jamie? And Jamie is also a yes, and so that, and those were the two motions, right?
Correct. Thank
So the
you.
I'm just curious, the location hasn't been
Has not
finalized?
been determined.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Just curious.
The project has received a lot of interest, I know, in the community, so I think people will be excited to see
Good,
what's been going on.
good.
Yeah.
So. All right, so I think we're ready to circle back to the Hopkins project update. You guys wanna? Welcome.
Jeff had something come up, so he is en route, but we can certainly cover a good amount of it. Bear with me as I get this.
Do you want us to take something else out of order before we go to you then?
No, this should only
Okay.
take a moment. I can cover his content if necessary. Just getting the slides that we sent the committee. There we go. So thank you for having us today. Today represents a big milestone for the project. As you know, we've been at this for a good period of time now, and one of the major milestones that we recently reached was the successful funding vote at town meeting for the project. So today represents the first step in beginning the construction contract and really putting shovels in the ground. So for the new members, we prepared just a brief overview of sort of the content of the project. You may not have followed it as closely as the school committee that had brought us to this point. So in general terms, the project consists of an addition to the Hopkins School and a renovation of the existing Hopkins School so that we can add 6 general classrooms, make provisions for 4 future modular classrooms, which are being brought over from the Elmwood School, provide space for 2 new SPED classrooms. As it relates to the 6th grade programming that currently exists at the middle school, we're going to introduce some STE classrooms and some enhanced science classrooms, as well as expand the capacity with an additional art room that will serve as a digital art room, which mimics programs that are now available to the students in the middle school. We're also going to introduce some new spaces for related arts, including an expanded band and chorus room that can support the enrollment numbers that are in those programs. We're going to enlarge the cafeteria so it's more consistent with the size appropriate to the number of students that are within the building. Create a half gym that will serve as a multi-purpose space for activities other than, say, a sports court. So it's not a basketball-sized gym. It's a space with a high ceiling that can allow for running, linear ball games, other activities in there, and introduce some new program activities into gym other than the traditional basketball-shaped gym that we're all accustomed to. We're going to enlarge the nurse suite to make it appropriate for the number of students that are there, as well as enlarge the administrative suite and some of the custodial and maintenance needs so that we can bring materials into the building more efficiently and also enlarge the cafeteria and servery significantly. We're also providing dedicated spaces for ESOL and renovating some of the spaces that have been chopped up as the school has tried to adapt to the needs of the growth, so that they're right-sized and appropriate for the ultimately 803 students that Hopkins will provide for. All in all, it's about 102,000 square feet, which includes 28,000 square feet that will be added to the building.
Sorry, it's 28,000 square feet
Of
of
the
new
addition,
construction.
of new construction. It's about 107,000 square feet of or it's 78,000 square feet of renovation.
And what's the, you may be getting this, I'm sorry if I'm cutting you off, what's the price per square foot on new construction and renovation?
I don't have that breakdown. It's less than it was at the it's less than it was at the funding vote. In advance of the funding vote, we're down about $700,000 or we're trending down about $700,000 from where we were at
Of the overall construction cost?
of the overall construction cost.
Okay, but we've never parsed out square foot price, new construction versus renovation.
It's a what I would call a fuzzy number because they're not separable. I can separate it in any number of ways to justify any number of positions.
Okay.
So I could tell you just the square foot of the addition itself and give you that breakdown, and I have that and could certainly pull it up before we leave tonight. But that won't take into account the site work, which is necessary for both scenarios, which is where it becomes a gray area.
Okay.
In terms of the overall site, we're going to create additional visitor and staff parking north of the building, as well as an expanded student drop-off area. We're also going to have a slightly smaller parking, but overall a net parking increase that is appropriate for the increase in staff that will come with raising this to an 803 student school. We're expanding the bus drop-off and creating an area that will be appropriate for the number of buses we're dealing with. And we're also, I did want to note the one caveat, the budget that was approved at town meeting and the current construction number that we're looking at today does not include the work for the future modular. So in the slide here that was distributed to the school committee in advance, we have outlined the area that is, would largely be a grassy area while we wait for that modular construction to be delivered a year later. So currently, the plan is that we would open in 2026, in February with the addition. We'll work with the school at the tail end, or at the start of the 25-26 school year to figure out how the addition will be used in that February to June period. And then further, we're going to open the full school as a 4-5 school for the 26-27 school year. A year later, when the Charleswood School comes online, at that point, we will bring the 6th grade into the Hopkins School, and the 4th grade will go into the new Charleswood School. That will be the point at which we'll, in advance of that, plan for the modulars, which will be taken offline when Elmwood is no longer used, to be brought over as the hope is that it will be paid for with savings from the 2 active projects that we're currently looking at between Charleswood and the Hopkins budget. Any questions for you?
I have a more probably kind of global question. What's the, and again, as someone who's new to the school committee, this has probably been covered. What's the oversight mechanism in place to keep on budget? I mean, I've been told with, construction, residential, commercial schools that it'll cost $50 million, it ends up costing $70 million, $60 million. It almost never goes down.
That's a great question.
Right.
Why don't we discuss that
Okay,
once we're sort of at the end?
got it.
And because it's a big question, it's an important question, and I'd like to get through the content before we get into the sort of broader questions. It's a very important question to bring up, and I think we have a great answer for it.
Okay, great.
So just an overview of the floor plan. You can see the modifications that are here. Let's see if I can get my cursor on the screen. There we are. So the larger gym, it's the same or slightly larger than the existing gym. This is the long, narrow, multi-purpose space that we have adjacent to the building. Each floor has 5 basic classrooms that are used for a mix of art, general education, science education, as well as the new intensive room on this level. And then upstairs is a similar layout with similar sized classrooms. In the existing building, we're modifying a couple of the science classrooms to support the some of the programmatic requirements that we're bringing from the middle school, as well as reworking a large portion of the center of the building, which is one of the spaces that's been slowly chopped up over time. We're trying to find the right size for each of the programmatic elements that's going to go there. The gym becomes the cafeteria, and it's supported by a servery that's about 3 times the size of what's there. As many of you know, the school has grown exponentially from what it was designed for, as many of the as the Hopkinton schools have, and so the servery is appropriately sized for the number of students that it's going to serve. We have a band and chorus room, which you can see pictured in the top corner here, and all of these renderings are available in the packet that we distributed to all of you if you'd like to see a sort of a larger version. I know it doesn't display that well in this size. That's separated by an acoustical partition that's folding that allows them to split it into 2 rooms or have a full ensemble within that space, which is one of the programmatic elements that we wanted to make sure we addressed. There's also a separate music classroom that's part of this, and a storage area that'll serve the building's facilities needs. On the second floor, the movements in the classrooms are not as extreme, but we're still making modifications to some of those rooms and renovating a number of the rooms. We're also, this is where the digital art room is. We have another science classroom and 2 additional classrooms, and a learning center at the end of the hall. The modular that you see at the end here will just be a blanked off wall at the end of the initial building construction, with the 1-year period before the new building is brought online. In terms of the overall schedule, it remains largely unchanged. We're at the point now where we're going to make the early construction package. So the project is being bid as construction manager at risk. Ricky and Rob in the audience are the project manager and project executive for Commodore Builders. They're going to set what we call a guaranteed maximum price. And so tonight is the first step in setting that guaranteed maximum price. We expect that we'll have 26 months of construction, which would have us opening in August of 2026. And then we'll have a period of construction closeout where we resolve the remaining contracts, finish up any open punch list items, and then a period the following summer where we'll be bringing over the Elmwood modular once we know that it's taken offline. So getting into the cost estimate, just to set the tone for your question, which is a great question. At town meeting, we appropriated for the overall construction budget, which included a number of items, including an owner's contingency, which is more for soft costs, additional design fees, FF&E purchases, furniture, fixture, and equipment, AV purchases, technology, as well as a lot of the administrative costs and designer fees that are associated with it. It also, as it remains at the end of the job, can be used for any purpose that the committee sees fit. Separate from that, we have a change order contingency, and that change order contingency is set to address things that come up in the construction process. The Massachusetts public procurement laws don't necessarily set a level playing field for the owners. They're really challenging to work with because in the effort to make them fair bidding, they also create a lot of opportunities for scope gaps between various subs that are bid publicly. And so we find in an, I believe we're at 7% contingency. We have a 7% contingency, which is on top of the construction cost to cover things like change orders that was part of the budget that was voted on. And so generally that is intended to cover unforeseen conditions, authorities having jurisdiction, the building inspector, the fire department, others.
7% across all the various contingencies you just
I believe
mentioned.
it's set to the
7%
construction.
off the total construction, so it'd be 7% of the 41.4 million,
And so that
which
is
is 2.9 million.
that is managed by the school committee. Separate from that, within the CM at risk procurement that we did with Commodore, and you'll see it in some of the information that we distributed to you, they've set a 2.5% contingency, which is a number that they bid on when we procured with them originally, and they'll use that in order to manage to some of the unknowns that relate to the guaranteed maximum price. Guaranteed maximum price is based on their view of what they see on the drawings now and any implied intent in those drawings to deliver the building based on a set schedule for a fixed cost. And so what we're looking at today is the first step in setting that guaranteed maximum price by releasing I believe it's four
24% of the
major,
contract.
yeah, it's 20% of the contract, it's 4 major scopes, as well as the amount of money that it takes for Commodore to get going in the first couple of months, so that we can begin those scopes earlier than when we bid the project at large.
What's the max price?
It-
So it still remains to be seen. So the budget that we established at town meeting is the 41.4 million, right? And so right now, we've bid 24% of the total contract, and so that's where we are at the moment.
Mhm.
We're gonna bid the balance of 75% this summer, and so the guaranteed maximum price will need to come in under the 41.4 million.
We'll have to come in under that.
Yeah, the only option, if it came in over that, would be to borrow from your change order contingency. So amongst the budget itself that was approved at town meeting, there's the 2.9 million in construction change order contingency, another 250,000 in owner's contingency, so that
So
would be
there's-
for other.
So there's about 43 million that the town is on the hook for. Do I understand that the 40 million, or 40 and change, plus 2.4 million
So-
in contingent? I'm just trying to get a.
So,
No, it's correct,
Yeah,
yeah, so it's-
on the
I
hook
wouldn't
is
use
not
on the hook yet.
Yeah,
that's
on the
right.
hook is not the right way to
Okay.
describe it at this point.
What's the exposure?
So essentially, the town, through the appropriation at this town meeting in May and the prior town meetings that had money set aside for this project,
Mhm.
was $49.4 million. And so that's the bucket that we're working and managing too. That includes all the contracts you'll see tonight, plus the balance of the construction GMP, and then all other allowances holds. And so we have a detailed project budget that kind of breaks it down into line items. And so you're approving the bulk of it tonight, but there's still lots of little buckets that deal with the issues that come up along the way.
Right, and that 49 million, that includes all the contingencies?
That's correct.
So the total exposure to the town, if that's a better word, is 49 million, which is what has been appropriated.
Yeah, I probably still wouldn't use the word exposure, but the confines that this project has to operate under is coming in under that 49 million. Anything over that would require getting additional funding and going back through a town meeting motion.
I have some of the town meeting slides if you want me
Sure.
to
Okay.
put them back up.
I'm just curious what guardrails are in place that we go above, or construction goes above the 49 million, and you come back to the town and say, well, we have this building, the school, that we need another 5 million, another 10 million. And the town is sitting here saying, well, what choice do we have but to spend another 5 or 10 million? And I'm just curious what guardrails are in place to
So-
protect the town and its money against that.
I'd like to take a step back, if we could, and talk about this in a conceptual level. I think that'll help the discussion.
Okay.
Currently, right now, your exposure to Commodore Builders, the contractor of the building, is a little over 140,000. I want to say it's 165.
158.
158. That if as of today you say, you know what, I hate all of this, I'm going home, that's your exposure of the town right now. That's what you've contractually agreed to pay them. You've also spent money so far on Vertex's fee, as well as the designer's fee to get the project to this point. That's the only exposure that you have at the moment, from the sense that you've committed that money to the project. What we're bringing to you today is the first portion of the larger construction project. And what that is it's a defined scope of work that Commodore has gone out to 4 major subcontractors: site work, geothermal, structural, and concrete, in order to have them bid the project based on the scope that's currently shown on the drawings, and set both a price based on that bid and what they feel is missing from that bid or undefined from that bid, to ensure that they can deliver that scope of work. So should the committee vote on that proposal tonight, that would be the guardrails of the project that you've set to move forward, so that we can begin to procure the concrete, we can begin to procure the steel, we can begin to procure the geothermal subs, so that we can have them scheduled and ready to go, and so that we can begin moving dirt around, so that we can prepare to open the school with the modifications, so that we can safely begin construction and operate a school right next to each other. So that would be what you would be voting on today, and that price is based on the completion of those scopes of work. And it has come in, I'll jump forward just because I think it's helpful to the process. So if you look here,
The little line in the white space.
in the white space in the middle there, we expected from the construction budget that Jeff described that we would spend $41,435,000 on the construction contract. And that was set based on our 60% CD construction estimate. We have worked with Commodore Builders. They'll be happy to share how intensely we've worked with them to make sure that we come in within that amount. And so we continued to develop the drawings with Perkins Eastman, and we continued to develop the project with Commodore Builders, and they estimated that development, and they came in at $40,898,311 for that same base scope. Also, in working with the school administration and the facilities director, we've identified that it makes sense to, while we're doing all this other work, attempt to upgrade the building's controls. Currently, it works on an antiquated pneumatic system, and we want to switch the remaining controls that are not already digital to those digital controls, because it'll make everything work a little more efficiently. We've done retro commissioning with WSP, which was a consultant that we brought in for the design and now the construction services, which is also before you tonight. And they've taken a look at how some of the things we aren't repairing are functioning, so that we can have some strategies in place for how we address those various parts. So we're doing this on multiple fronts, and the ultimate goal there is to address as many of the unknowns with the documents, so that when we get to the next stage, after tonight, assuming that you vote for the construction amendments and the designer and OPM amendments, the next stage would be to continue that work, and we would go to procure what's called the trade bidders. So the trade bidders are a number of categories that the state has determined have to be bid separately in an open public bid process. I believe 2 meetings ago, you voted on the list of trade bidders who went through a pre-qualification process where we made sure that they were qualified to do the work in terms of checking the references, in terms of figuring out whether they had the financial capability, the bonding capacity to take on work that was equivalent to what we were looking at, and to make sure that people who have worked with them in the past would want to work with them again. All of that came together to end up at our $41,284,283 number that's at the bottom here, and that is that base construction scope plus what we estimate the controls to cost. There's always risk. Bidding risk is one of the big risks of construction. So far, we've been able to mitigate some of that risk by going to the marketplace, as Jeff said, with 24% of those bidders. That has allowed us to come in at $576,302 below that number with the alternate in it. So while that does not eliminate all of the risk, it gives you certainty of cost with for the scope of work that we have, with those 4 trades. The process never ends. We continue to work directly with Commodore, who provides a service to the town. That's why we went with a CM at risk for an occupied renovation. We're going to continue to work with the designer to ensure that as changes come up, that we've addressed them in an economical manner, that we try and get ahead of things before they become a problem, and that we generally take a very proactive approach to make sure that a lot of those things that can tumble out of control, as you said at the beginning, are mitigated to the greatest extent possible. There's always risk in construction, and so what we see as the biggest risks associated with construction starts with the bidding risk. This is based on accumulated information in a database to set unit costs based on what we're seeing with other construction projects. And that's how we come up with an estimate. But as soon as you go to the marketplace, that's where you're really putting dollars to donuts. And so when we go to the marketplace, while we've been successful so far in bringing the construction estimate down $700,000 from where we were at town meeting, we may still have some areas where there's been changes. Over the course of the pandemic especially, we saw wild swings. A lot of those wild swings, we've seen them calm down in the marketplace. So that gives us more certainty and less risk than we would have had if we bid this 3 years ago, but it doesn't eliminate that risk. And so we'll come back to you in September after we've bid the trade bidders publicly, and Commodore has bid the rest of the scope, and at that time they'll set that guaranteed maximum price. They'll have their own contingency for things that they haven't covered in that guaranteed maximum price, which is the 2.5% or about $1 million that's going to be part of that. Buyout savings, as they buy out the remainder of that scope at that point, or beyond that point, will also go to that contingency, which gives us some leverage to identify things that come up in the course of construction that weren't accounted for and bill them against within that guaranteed maximum price. We do still, in construction, because there's always risk, see several large areas where change orders happen. I can tell you that the most often change order that I've seen typically is owner scope changes. It's typically the owner gets to the point in construction where they say, hey, this isn't quite what I wanted, my circumstances change, I want to do this slightly differently. And you're not bidding in a competitive environment like you are at the beginning. And so we have mechanisms that we've added to the contract for how we handle those change orders. We've negotiated, or we've added into there the negotiation of labor rates that will be within there. So we have restrictions on how big those labor rates can become against the prevailing wage that we're required to pay. And so we use a lot of those as cost controls to make sure that we stay within that, a reasonable amount for any of those change orders that come up. Change orders are typically scope changes, unforeseen conditions, AHJ changes, and I'm blanking on the fourth major one.
Drawing errors and omissions.
And drawing errors and omissions. Most architects do a pretty good job, but we generally see about 2% to 3% as the average for change orders. And in some cases, we see slightly higher. And in renovations, we often see slightly higher, largely because the unforeseen conditions, the things hidden in the walls that you
don't know
can't
what's behind
otherwise
the walls.
see.
I get that. So if I understand it correctly, and sorry, I keep pushing back on this. There's going to be several times you'll come to this committee and say, you need to approve a certain amount of money for next steps. Is that, do I understand that correctly?
The main 2 batches are now, and then we'll come back again the end of August, early September for the balance of the major contract. If the owner comes to you with significant scope changes that are changes from what was set in the original, set on the onset of the project, we would bring those back to you to approve those as well.
Okay, so at the end of the summer, early fall, when we do that next major approval, we will have that max price
Correct.
set, and then we'll have a much better and clear picture on the exposure to the town as related to cost.
Absolutely.
And do I assume that max price is, let's say you come and say, hey, it's $52 million. okay? And that's the number. And if it costs you 60 million to do it, you guys are on the hook for the 8 million. Do I understand max price correctly?
Yeah, barring any unforeseen conditions or changes to those things, as long as nothing changes from the drawings, if it was.
I get it. If the town says, hey, we want to change everything, and that's gonna throw the budget haywire, I understand that. But if you guys have the plans, we've approved the plans, this is what we're gonna do. Max price is 52 million, and it comes in at 62 million, the town's not on the hook for the extra 10. Is that how that works?
So there are two things. So when we're done with the bidding, the max price that we set and lock in at that point will be the cost of the job to complete everything that's been drawn in the drawings. And then the changes that Ricky's alluding to is if it is an unforeseen condition, if the school decides to add something, if the fire department requires something, or there's errors in the drawings, those are the 4 reasons that we use that $2.9 million to fund those additional changes.
But is that 2.9 part of the max price?
No,
Or that's
the
outside of the
2.9
max?
is a budget controlled by the
So-
town.
Okay, so it'll be the max price plus the contingency, plus the 2.9, is that
Yeah.
already, which
The
is already?
2.9 is set aside
set
under the
aside.
control of the school department
Okay.
and not
What if
within the
it's-
contract.
What if it's, all right, let's just round numbers, it's max price 50 million, and we have the 2.9 in there, so call it 53 million, but it costs 57 million. Who's paying the 4 million?
So the project would pause, if you will. So if we came back in August and with the numbers were not reflecting the caps that were set aside at town meeting, we would pause and understand why. There are elements that we can back out of the project, such as the controls package, such as the site improvements. There are things that are not mission critical to getting the students educated, but are part of the overall scope of the project that will complete it. So there are items you can peel back in the onion and still have a project to move forward with.
Mhm.
And so we would have all those conversations with you should those things arise, should we come in over the number. Over the course of the project, when you're in construction with the guaranteed price, in the beginning, the contractor will be very reserved about using that 2.5% because they're at the beginning of the long road.
Mhm.
And they're not sure about risk either, so they're gonna protect that number. Over the course of the job, when we get to the final renovation phase, if they haven't used a lot of that they'll use that within the contract to deal with issues that come
Mhm.
up along the way. So the earlier you are on the project, the more both sides will protect their interests and hold on to those contingencies. The deeper you get into the project, the more fluid the conversation is when the wish lists come out, when you guys feel more comfortable, and when the contractor feels more comfortable where their numbers are. But when the bid gets set in September, that's the number they're committing to deliver with everything that we can forcefully say they owned on the documents. And there will be those little things where they say it's not owned, we say it is owned. We can direct them under protest to do the work, and it could always be fought out at a later date, if there's a discrepancy with how they viewed the documents versus how the designer viewed the documents. So the important thing for you to understand is there's lots of layers
Mhm.
of checks and balances, and there's lots of abilities to pivot within the overall project to make sure that we deliver the end job at the very end of the project on budget. Because this is a 1990s building, the level of unforeseen conditions inside the building are a lot less than when you're renovating a building in the 50s and 60s that have all the asbestos in it, or an older building that has more structural issues. So there are risks with the renovation, and we will hit some of them, but they're not at the same level as the 1950s, 40s, and 70s buildings, which really do cripple those types of
Right.
allowances.
Got it.
Another important point to understand about a guaranteed maximum price is that it's made up of what I'd call 3 major components. There is what we bid the subs at, so what we're gonna buy out their contracts at. Then there's a layer of what we call holds that the CM will add to those numbers, and we have some in the numbers that we're presenting tonight. And those are the scopes that aren't clearly defined or that they can't get a bid number from now, but they wanna make sure that they cover because they saw it on the drawings.
Mhm.
And then there's owner's allowances that are baked into that same number. Those are amounts that are set based on scope ideas where they can't commit to defining the whole scope of them. And all of that is negotiated in the numbers that we're bringing to you tonight and that we'll bring to you in September. The important difference between a hold and an allowance is that Commodore's contract is committed that the hold is a fixed amount to complete that scope of work. If it exceeds that, they can use the contingency, which they have to seek authorization for, and they'll use that contingency to cover overages, and they'll return underages to that same contingency. The allowances, because they're undefined, are not set risked. So a good example of that is we came to you last week for authorization to do the
Soil
the
testing.
geoprobe soil testing. If within the number we present to you tonight, we have an allowance for if we hit issues in the soil above the state's minimum standards. If we exceed that allowance based on the soil testing we do next week, that hits the job as a change order once we exceed that allowance, because it's a risk that we're looking at a field, we can't just say, looking at the field today, until we get that data back, exactly what the fixed right number is for how
Yeah.
much we're going to encounter.
Got it. So, and maybe, I don't know, if we went through this with Marathon, and I'm pushing back on stuff that maybe I don't need to push back on, and I'm just trying to get some certainty in cost to the town, because we have a lot of money we have to spend over the next handful of years. I'm hearing that there's max price, there's contingency built in, but stuff happens and we may not be able to come in at max price plus 2.9 million contingency, and there's no real guardrail or ceiling that the town and its tax basis is on the hook for. Because it could easily hit the max price plus the 2.9 million, and then we'd have to go back to the town and say, hey, we need more money, right? It doesn't sound like, if I understand that correctly, that may be the answer.
These are all great questions, right? And it is part of the dialogue, and we have this on all projects.
Yeah.
So your questions
Yeah.
are right on, right?
Yeah.
And so it's about understanding the road ahead.
Yeah.
And-
And I'm sorry, so I understand, been involved with some construction, not to this level, but working on a kind of similar-ish project. So it's why I'm kind of pushing back a little bit. And again, I know a lot of construction can be 40 million, it costs 60 million. And then the town said, hey, we're good with 40 million or 42 or whatever we,
I'll say that, you know,
Approved.
over the history of, of my 22 years, like in public bidding projects, outside of COVID, it's very rare that you had to come back to the town to actually ask for money. You know,
Yeah.
COVID was an anomaly.
I
where,
understand,
you know,
I understand that. And was
But
that
my
the
point
case
is
with
that-
Marathon, and did we?
So Marathon went back there were two Marathon projects. So the addition
was
went
the
back
addition.
because you appropriated the money before you bid the project, much before, and that was already hitting some of those spikes in the market.
Yeah.
And so that one needed to go back because it was a smaller project hits bigger ripples, right? A
Mhm.
bigger project can absorb more of the
Yeah.
ripples. The original Marathon went back because you actually did an addition to the project, and so the original guaranteed maximum price there would have built the entire original Marathon building. But because of enrollment, you went back and actually went for $1.5 million, I think it was, to fund the addition. You actually came in under the original appropriation, and they gave back $2 million to the town. But at the time, to your point, we didn't know that, right? We went
Yeah.
back for more money because we were adding scope to the project, and we hadn't negotiated all the prices with the subs yet. We got the money, we completed the project, and lo and behold, we did not use all the contingencies within the guaranteed maximum price. The town did not use all the change order buckets, and we were able to turn back to the town over $2 million. And so it was a good story at the end of the day because you had allowances built into there. This project is set up the same way. With a guaranteed maximum price, there are multiple layers, as Chris alluded to, with the allowances, with holds, with the contingency, all baked within that guaranteed maximum price. We have our $2.9 million in change order contingency. We have another $250,000 in owner contingency. And then there's other line items that we don't necessarily need all of, but they were educated guesses at the time we went to town meeting. And so we will always calibrate the project throughout it. You know, Vertex is not going to wait to the end of the job and say, hey, I need the money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Chris is very astute at carrying a risk register, where he'll dial that up over the course of the project and come to you. If we see things are trending in the wrong direction, we'll talk to the school department of what can we live without,
Yeah.
right? We're not going back to the town, right? There are things that can be shed from the project and still deliver the core needs of the job. We'll always have those conversations. We'll always give you guys those
Yeah.
options.
Got it. Sorry, I know.
No, I think that was
No, it's an important conversation, and the public always
Blow
wants
up
to
the
hear that too,
agenda.
so.
No, you know what, I think we're
Okay,
good.
all right.
You
Got it.
should, you
Thank
should
very
ask
much.
those questions.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
approving this
Yeah.
amount of money. It's
Yeah.
important to
Yeah.
talk
It's a
about.
lot of
yeah.
money.
An engaged owner is the easiest way to keep a project in control. A lot of the stories that you hear, we often see that's the result of disengaged owner because they don't realize the ramifications of the decisions that they're making. So the more that you care about the things that you're authorizing, the easier it is to understand whether you're making decisions that will help that bottom line or create problems down the road.
Got it. Thank you.
So the-
Jamie, did you have any questions before we?
So the good overall picture is that so far on the construction, we are trending under. Obviously, we have another 75% or so to bid. We could, just in the same way that a lot of these have come under, some of those could come over, but ultimately we've seen a positive step in that we've seen all of the all of the bidders that we've gone to so far have come in under the budget that we set at the 90%. So that's a positive step. Additionally, in addition to that GMP, or early package GMP that we're talking about tonight, we'll have an amendment for the OPM fees. So the OPM contract was set based on design only. And so tonight we're bringing you the OPM contract that will deal with the OPM fees during construction, which includes a person on site at the construction site who works directly for the town, not for the architect or the contractor, who's protecting the town's interests on the course of construction. He'll start early in the project and should be consistent throughout, and he'll work to identify issues, bring things to the table, make sure that he's checking to make sure that we're getting what's in the documents, and really ensuring that we're staying on top of the progress and the life of the job so that we can be proactive in addressing things.
That's, the OPM fee is a flat fee, or is it based on hours or
So it's-
construction code?
It'll be a lump sum, but it's built on the hours. So in the backup of our contract amendment, you'll see that it's the hours. So I have a dedicated person in the field that is your eyes and ears.
Okay.
And then I have some Crystal time and a project manager underneath them, working the overall management of the
Got it.
project.
And the overall, it's based on the schedule that's provided in the documents. The architect's fee is also there. That's their fee over the course of construction. That includes some of their consultants' fees for having someone on site, the geotechnical engineer on site to make sure that the foundations go to good bearing soil, the geothermal consultant to make sure that when the well drilling is occurring, that somebody's monitoring to ensure that it happens the right way. It also includes some of the overall construction oversight over the course of construction to make sure that the building's being built in conformance with the drawings and specifications. In all three cases, we took the budget items that were associated with the contracts amendments that you're discussing tonight, and so that we could give you a picture of how that falls versus what we're asking for. So for the OPM fees, we're also under us as a consultant doing construction testing and inspection, and the balance of the commissioning during the construction period. And when we take the budget values that we had set at town meeting compared to what we're asking for tonight, that came in at $31,392 under those budget values. So what that means is that you still have that money available for things that come up in our contracts or to repurpose for other things as the job progresses. Similarly with the architect, we identified the various buckets that relate to their fee and the proposals that we got from them for their contract, and they came in at $120,375 below those budget amounts. So overall, these three amendments together, we're in a generally a good place versus the budget that was voted on at town meeting.
Got it.
So I'll turn it over to Jeff to talk through some of the details of each of those.
That's a
That
lot to
we haven't
digest.
already
Yeah,
touched.
it's a lot to digest. So where we are today, which is we're at the kickoff of construction, and so should we receive your blessing tonight, we will looking to approve 3 contracts. And so as Chris alluded, it's broken down to the 3 prime consultants, and each of those have sub-consultants. And so Perkins Eastman, as Chris noted, has the geotechnical, looking at the foundation, as well as the geothermal engineer. So they'll have 2 subs out on site. It also includes all of their in-house design elements in terms of having them come out and do monitoring in the field on a weekly or monthly basis. as well as Perkins Eastman themselves to attend the weekly meetings and to do physical inspections and then close out. That total contract for Perkins Eastman, amendment number 2, is $1,376,625. Perkins came in under the budget. They submitted their additional proposal. We went back and forth with them a few times to make sure we got the right scope with the geothermal and the right scope with the geotechnical. Right now, they align with the schedules that the contractor has put out in terms of monitoring. There's a chance that we need to come back for additional amount there, depending on when we actually complete all those geothermal things. But right now, we think that's a safe number within those contracts, and it was the right number to appropriate. There's still a balance within those line items, as you see from the 120, to deal with it if we want to release it. But we want to release the right amount now, and like all contingencies, hold on to them in case we need them later. The second proposal before you is the Vertex companies. That's us as your owner's project manager. It includes our on-site services for that dedicated person. They're not only managing construction, they're also the liaison to Matt, the principal, right? So, there's going to be tests, there's going to be, back-to-school events, there's going to be things where he needs to talk to the contractors. George McMahon, which is our on-site person, it will be the mouthpiece to the project team on the day-to-day, and we'll have a huddle with Matt every morning to
He's
make sure.
on site every day.
He's on site every day, from the beginning to the end. So that's a two-year commitment. It's 26 months, which is the bulk of our cost. It's that dedicated person for 2.5 years, essentially, is what's driving our overall cost. Inclusive of that is the testing and inspection. So there's an allowance in our proposal for $120,000. We're competitively building out currently 3 proposals to do testing and inspection. That's a unit price contract, so we haven't picked which vendor it is yet. We received them today. Some of them are higher for the concrete, or higher for soil, or higher for the window testing. So we're going to vet those out in a matrix. We may choose 2 of the 3 instead of just a singular firm, depending on what's the best benefit for dollars for the town. But there's an allowance in there set aside to do that. They're all firms that we've worked with. And the third consultant under Vertex is the commissioning consultant. Back in April, we competitively bid that against 3 firms, awarded them, negotiated both design and construction at that point, but only authorized design because we only had the prior town meeting appropriation. So now this is bringing forward the pre-negotiated contract for construction administration. And that's under Vertex's contract for a total of $1,645,607.50. The third and biggest contract here is Commodore Builders. So as I noted, we've gone through and bid 24% of the overall contract. The way it works with these first 4 trades is their contractors picked by Commodore. They initially had to submit a list of vendors. We talked about whether we liked them or not, went through a similar pre-qualification process as we did with the public bid contractors, released them to perform bidding. They got initial numbers back in. We've been tracking to make sure how many vendors they went out, how many came back. Both ourselves and Perkins sat through the de-scoping meetings to make sure they fully interpreted the drawings and filled in any gaps, because we're only at 90% documents for those. So we're really trying to fill in some of the gaps and make sure they fully understood the program. Commodore came back with another number. We beat them up a little bit. We've gone back and forth, I think, 4 times. We're looking at all the things in the project. Chris alluded to allowances and holds, right? It's a natural part in the project where they're trying to protect themselves, we're trying to protect you. And so that back and forth happens as we squeeze the numbers down to make sure we wring it out and put it back on our side of the fence so that the town can control it versus the contractor. We've come to a satisfactory agreement, and that's the contract that's before you tonight, which is Commodore's contract amendment number 2 for a total of $8,962,936, and that represents about 24%. As Chris showed you on the slide, we're trending $727,000 below the budget. So should you approve those contracts tonight, with the construction management, that's the guaranteed maximum price for the early trade package. So what we're gonna do from here forward is work with Ricky and Bob to allow them to release those contracts. So right now, within the backup, we're not gonna give names right now because it's a public meeting, but they've included their 2 subs that they're going back and forth with. They initially got 3 or 4 or 5 numbers depending on the sub. They're down to the final 2. So over the next week or week and a half, we will work with them and issue what's known as a release to award. It's an RTA. And that's basically them coming back and saying, here's my final number. It's below my budget. I want to change a couple of allowances or holds within my number. Can I do that? Where are your checks and balances? We would then release it as long as it fits within the guaranteed maximum price and then have them proceed. So even after tonight, there's still belts and suspenders and checks and balances with the contract, and we're your rep. And that's the reason of the state has an OPM law, so that we're only beholden to the town and not the designer or the contractor. So those are the three amendments that are before you tonight, and then there's a separate memo, which we can either talk about now or talk about after.
Go ahead.
So we've talked a lot about cost and control. So in addition to the release to awards that are part of the guaranteed maximum price, change orders will happen on a project. And so as Chris eloquently outlined, there's 4 types of risks with unforeseen scope changes, authorities with jurisdiction, and errors and omission. If it's a scope change, we're going to come back to you, right, because you have the right to say we need that or we don't. Right? It's an optional change.
Yeah.
Things that are not optional are unforeseen conditions or the authorities with jurisdiction, and in most cases, design errors and omissions. Sometimes we can work out a design error and omission where we give a little with the contractor and the architect and tweak a detail, but overall, those are the 3 items that will come back for cost changes. Because of the way public meeting law is structured, you have to publicly advertise a meeting, make sure you have a quorum, hold that. It may not happen on a weekend because of the 48-hour posting requirement. So it makes management of construction more problematic. So what we're proposing here in this memo is to have an ability to have either Susan or Nancy as your liaisons move the project forward in between those meetings and to allow us to manage the project for you. And so I've recommended thresholds for those type of items. They break into a couple of different buckets. So what's called a CCD is a construction change directive. We don't have a choice. We have to proceed. This is a requirement. Either the authority with jurisdiction at it, it's an unforeseen, or the error is an error and has to be proceeded with. Those need to happen immediately, and so that's one level of change order that we've proposed in here. The second is a potential change order where, unless it fits one of those 3, it may be an owner scope change and it's more optional. But in the case of the first 3, it could still be a change that's necessary. So we're proposing having Susan have the authority with us as your eyes and ears and the designer. And so those 3 levels of people to sign off on that before we actually release it. And then after a $75,000 threshold, to then go to Nancy as your liaison in between meeting time to have her be the belt and suspenders in case we need to come back before this body to release something that's time sensitive. So we're recommending in this memo a kind of detailed breakdown of how we would break up that work and divvy it up, but always know that in order for Susan to sign off on anything, both Perkins and Vertex have to give the nod that we agree with it, and this is an appropriate value. Chris alluded to labor rates. We're going to rake Ricky over the coals with labor rates, and he doesn't even know what's coming yet. But we do look at the labor rates. We dig down there. Mass public bid law, you have to do prevailing wage, which essentially is union agreements. But there's lots of nuances in there. Contractors will throw in a lot of extra stuff, and we will push out whatever we can. We then set those labor rates per subcontractor through the entirety of the job. And so we're always doing that level of review, and we'll do that before we bring any change orders back to
State
Nancy.
mandates all work as union on.
Has to be equivalent, not union, but equivalent. So
Okay.
it's called a prevailing wage. So it doesn't exactly match the union.
Yeah.
In some cases, actually, it's above or below, but tries to align with, union
Yeah.
agreements where possible. And
And-
it varies where you are in terms of district. So Boston has a higher prevailing wage rate than 128, than 495, and then Western Mass. Right?
And
Yeah.
as part of the procurement of the project, we get a schedule of rates that lasts for the first year, and that sets what the rates are for all the different trades. And it outlines the different parts of that rate that you must pay them. And then on top of that, just like your paycheck or any one of your paychecks, there'll be FICA, the federal income, Social Security, all that kind of stuff gets layered on there. There's some insurance, usually some unemployment, typical benefits that you would see. And then on top of that, depending on the trade, they may want to add additional things. And the contract that we developed with the school administration back in November that we used to procure Commodore builders, we have a number of provisions written into that we very avidly enforce to ensure that the town is paying fair labor rates for that labor. But given the prevailing rate, wage rate that we start with, those numbers are typically higher than you may see in your standard residential contracts.
Any questions? Jamie, just want to look down to you. Do you have any questions before we move into the separate motions? Signing up.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, are you able to get that? That's not,
I've got the motion.
oh, you have copies of them?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, and I
that's
got it to
fabulous.
put on screen.
I wonder if, and you can get it up on screen, that's
I
great,
was
because
trying
then
to
Jamie will be
connect,
able to
oh,
see it.
for whatever reason it wasn't working. But Bob, I am gonna need to connect for another.
Have to?
Mm-hmm. Oh, they're up there now, Bob.
Okay. Jamie, can you see those from, on the, you probably,
She will in a
it doesn't, okay. She will in a minute. Okay.
How's he?
So these motions that are from the, each of the things that were discussed along the way. We can take them one at a time, but if people have questions on any of them before we start making them,
I'm good.
is there somebody that would like to make a motion on the first one?
Motion, oh, go ahead, Chris.
Motion to approve the Perkins Eastman Architect Contract Amendment Number 2 dated 6/21/24 for $1,376,625 for construction, administration, and geotechnical monitoring services.
Motion by Chris,
Second.
second by Susan. We'll do a roll call, starting with you, Chris.
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
I'm a yes. And Jamie? Oh, the volume was better all of a sudden. That's great. Okay, so that is unanimous and so moved. So is there somebody on the second motion?
Motion to approve the Vertex Company's Contract Amendment Number 3 for dated 6/20/24 for $1,645,607.50 for construction, administration, commissioning, and testing and inspection services.
Motion by Chris. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Susan. We'll start with you, Chris.
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Jamie? Okay, and then the third motion.
Motion to approve the Commodore Builders Contract Amendment Number 2 dated 6/21/24 for $8,962,936 for early guaranteed maximum price, GMP Number 1, and for the initial release contractors to begin construction. Do I include the writing in green in the motion?
No.
Oh, okay.
All right, so motion by Chris.
Second.
Second by Susan. We'll start with you, Chris.
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Jamie? Okay, so it's unanimous. And then the final motion.
Motion to authorize Susan Rothermich, am I saying that right? To up to $75,000 and Nancy Kavanaugh up to $125,000 for change order authorization authority as outlined in the Vertex June 17, 2024 memorandum.
Okay, motion by Chris.
Second.
Second by Susan. Chris?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Jamie? Okay, so those are unanimous. Thank you all for coming in. Appreciate it. We've seen a lot of you guys recently, which is great.
Thank you for having us, and congratulations. This is an exciting chapter to really kick things off. So Chris said we're going to break ground in July, and we'll be off and running, and we'll be busy all summer and back in front of you in September with the balance of the contract. And we'll bring the same rigor to the numbers that we did now. with that
Grind them down.
That's good. That's what we like to see.
Ricky's going to be tired of us by the end of the summer.
It's gonna take that long?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move into the, do you want to do the Be Smart?
We can do either one. Be smarter,
Rich, do you have, oh, we got grants pulled up. Let's do it too. Grants since that is on the agenda.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, so we're moving in a new business item A, which is the HEF grant donation, and Dr. Kavanaugh is going to review that.
Thank you. So Chris Fredericks is the person who usually guides us through this process. Tonight, what we're asking you to do is to accept these grants from the Hopkinton Education Foundation. They are always so wonderfully generous with us. And what happens is there are some things in our classrooms that just really enhance teaching and learning. And so teachers, administrators, anyone can submit a grant request, and if you are awarded the grant, it's kind of a nice big deal for us. And essentially, it really does come right back to kids. So the first one is entitled Inclusive Representation of LGBTQ Identities. And this was submitted by Leanne McCorvey, Kelly Phillips, and Carolina Madden, who was an intern with us. All three of them work at the Hopkins School. And this will provide training and resources for Hopkins staff related to LGBTQ inclusivity and safe places. And the amount of that grant is $1,267. The second one is entitled Turn the Tide, Integrated Science and Reading Unit. This was submitted by Michelle Corliss, who is a fifth grade teacher at Hopkins, and it involves the creation of an integrated science and reading curriculum on environmental activism and the human impact on the Earth's water sources, along with an author visit. And that grant is in the amount of $1,849.74. The third one is very interesting, Library Read and Ride. Wendy MacArthur is the librarian at the middle school, and Lauren Pardee is the librarian at Hopkins. So they are getting 2 stationary bikes at each one of those libraries, and it's going to allow kids to read and ride. So combines physical exercise and reading. That grant is in the amount of $1,340.04. And then the final one, I will have to admit, I know very little about. It's entitled Enhancing Biology Labs with Innovative Tools. They are going to get a digital stereo microscope to improve group and classroom teaching in science labs. Apparently what this allows you to do is see the specimen 3-dimensionally. This was Michelle Oderna, Andrew Cotto, Bethany Spinks, and Lauren Garno. And that is in the amount of $2,295. You know that they had done the Anatomage table just a couple of years ago. I think our high school science teachers really keep, at the forefront of, kind of cutting technology. So this is exciting for us. So all told, it's $6,751.78, and we just need you to approve that and thank HEF for their amazing generosity.
What is the Hopkinton Education Foundation?
So they're a volunteer group of people. They do all kinds of fundraisers, and when they have plenty of money, they offer grants to the teachers and to the building principals.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great organization.
Great. Any other questions on the Hopkinton Education Foundation grants? Okay. Is there somebody that would like to make a motion relative to those?
I move to accept the Hopkins Education Foundation grants totaling $6,751,000. 6,000. 6 million would have been nice, wouldn't it?
They raise a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's really great parties.
Yeah. Now that I've lost, okay, $6,751.78. Did I say it right?
You said it right.
See,
Okay.
numbers are never my strong suit.
Motion by Susan.
Second.
Second by Chris. We'll do a roll call starting
Yes.
with you. Susan?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Jamie? And Jamie is a yes. It's unanimous. So many thanks to HEF for all their fundraising efforts and their time and efforts and funding into the schools. All right, so this brings us into old business item A, and that is the Be Smart the potential passing of a resolution. We had a very thorough and informative presentation at our last in-person meeting, and we discussed it. And I know that we had received from Carly Grant a link to some different potential resolutions that we could pass. I don't know if people had a chance to look at it. Dr. Kavanaugh was able to put through some of the language to make it Hopkinton specific, and if you want to.
Sure, I can walk you through this. Nancy and I had some conversations about, what kind of felt right for Hopkinton. We did look at the information that you had sent from Plymouth, I think, and Framingham. So we kind of came up with a suggested resolution, and obviously it's a committee decision. One of the things that Framingham had, they had something that resembled an introduction, and I liked that very much, and so really we just took their language and put it on this slide. The Hopkinton Public Schools take the responsibility of education very seriously. In addition to providing teaching and learning opportunities within the walls of our schools, we also look to create awareness opportunities for our entire community. The next paragraph, which is also part of Framingham, comes right from the MassGov site. Massachusetts residents 15 years and older who wish to possess, carry, and transport firearms, ammunition, and feeding devices are required to have a firearms license. Firearms licenses are issued by local municipal police departments. And anyone who's interested, we can put this up on our website. You can click on that link and it will take you to all kinds of information about gun ownership in Massachusetts. And one thing it might be important to interject here is that if something is Mass General Law, it always trumps anything that we do locally. This, I think, is the meat of what Be Smart has had conversations with us about, and that is safe storage of firearms. In Massachusetts, all guns must be stored in a locked container or equipped with a tamper-resistant mechanical lock or other safety device. Primitive firearms are exempt from this storage requirement. It is recommended that you store firearms unloaded separately from ammunition in locked compartments. So after the introduction, we talked about something that could be the authentic resolution. This is a suggestion. To support safe firearm storage, the Hopkinton School Committee resolves to direct the superintendent to work in collaboration with the Hopkinton Police Chief to send an annual reminder to families about the importance of firearm storage safety. Last year, on July 5th, Chief Bennett and I did just that. I reached out to him. He said he would be happy to collaborate with me again on sending something to families. Bullet number 2, acknowledge that deaths and injuries from firearms pose a substantial risk to public health. Access to a firearm is the common denominator in every firearm-related death or injury. The third part, as we make this resolution, we are publicly reminding the community that all guns must be stored in a locked container or equipped with a tamper-resistant mechanical lock or other safety device in accordance with Massachusetts general law. And then this last paragraph is something that we do annually. If someone comes to teach or work in the Hopkinton Public Schools newly, we make sure that they are ALICE trained. In addition, the Hopkinton Public Schools will ensure that intruder ALICE training for all persons responsible for the care of children in our schools. So we make sure that that happens.
Could you, ALICE is a acronym for?
Alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. And one of the things that's important to know about ALICE is you don't go necessarily in that order. What happens is you make judgments depending upon the nature of the threat. There's a lot of information out there now that says that evacuation proves to be perhaps the safest one of those letters in the acronym.
Great question. Other questions? Jamie, I'm gonna look down there. Okay. I appreciate that you reached out to the chief. I think it's great to be able to have the Hopkinton Police on board to show publicly the working together, and I know that the schools work closely as part of our safety protocols.
Yeah, I should note that when we do the ALICE training, Officer Santoro and I do that together with people.
Oh,
So-
that's great.
And last year in September, we actually took every single one of our employees, it did not matter where you worked or in what capacity, and we had 2 different sessions where we had Sergeant Van Ralton come in and do another one of those trainings for everyone. So it was very thorough.
In resolution, that when we make a resolution, that would be accessible on the website, just so that in addition to communications that go out from your office, it would also be available for people to be able to see and access from, which I appreciated the links that showed how we were able to access it through Framingham schools as well.
Dr. Kavanaugh, you drafted this, right?
I did,
Yeah.
yes.
Do you guys like this? I don't know if that's an
We do.
appropriate
And
question or.
I am so appreciative of the
Yeah.
time and effort you put into this, because I know how busy you are,
Right.
especially with all of this building stuff going on. Ideally, we would love more and more times a year, but that's something we can, if you feel like this is going well, that we can work with you and collaborate with you. Framingham actually said that if we work under the S'mores program, they will send you the template of the thing, and all you have to do is send it out. So they do 4 times a year. In June for Gun Violence Awareness Month, in September for Suicide Awareness, and then there's 2 other times a year. We find that the more you remind people, the more they are prone to follow through, right? So, but that's something we can talk about at a later time.
Yeah, I think that would have been my same feedback, is just ideally, I think just having it be a little bit, more often throughout the year at maybe key times, and not just, once
One other thing that came to mind is the school handbook. Did you consider whether you would want to add anything in there in reference to this? I think that was a component of the resolution. Of course, you decide what the resolution should be for Hopkinton and what's appropriate, but that's just one thing that was, I think, included in an example resolution.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I saw a handbook in either Plymouth or Framingham. The one reason that you don't see it here is that our MGL is very specific about what needs to go into student handbooks around student behavior and student conduct and student discipline. And because locking your firearm is something that happens in a private household, it doesn't really fit under the purview of, you know, the disciplinary responses in a student handbook. Like, we are typically controlling the behaviors of students and faculty while they are in school, on school time, under, you know, say they're on a field trip, they're still under the watchful eye of the Hopkinton Public Schools. But once they retreat to their own home, we really have no control over, you know.
Would love to hear if there are things that people, kind of hearing feedback from both Dr. Kavanaugh and from Be Smart, if there are changes that we'd like to make for now, or if we would like to use this as a starting point and come back to it, or what the committee's will is on that.
Seems very well written to me. That's why I had asked the ladies if, outside of send it more and that, it seems to be a very nicely written resolution, and it seems to hit everything. Is that?
Yeah, and I think it also gives the flexibility for how you want to communicate it. We've been sharing Be Smart. There are other programs out there. You can choose which one feels most appropriate. And one thing that I like about Be Smart, but many of the other ones, it's not just to gun owners, it's also to non-gun owners of, are they asking before their child goes to another house and things like that. So this gives you the flexibility to choose which one feels kind of appropriate.
And just off of that, today is a very appropriate day to be actually doing this because it's actually National Ask Day, which is when non-gun owners send their children to play dates at a new house. And we're trying to normalize that question. My child has allergies. Do you have nuts in the house? Is there a pool in the backyard? Is it fenced? Is there a gun in the home? And is it locked? So, yeah, I'm happy it's happening today.
Very appropriate. Presumably, when messages go out, might be able to draw from different things at different points in time too.
And we are happy to provide all of those resources as well. So
You guys have been very generous in providing for us both all the stuff you presented last week, but over time with different resources as well. So much appreciated on that. Jamie, did you have anything?
No, I appreciate all the work that you've been doing. I support the resolution. We asked when our kids go to new houses in the school, along with the poll questions and any other safety questions. I think the more that we look at, the easier it is for unowners and non-owners alike.
I also think the opportunity to have this conversation in a public setting where it could potentially be picked up by the media and be brought out in other ways is thankful for that, so thank you. Is there anybody that would like to make a motion?
We don't have to read that entire thing. We just
Nope.
can motion to accept the resolution as written by Dr. Kavanaugh.
I think just the resolution is written, because there are parts that may or may not have been adopted.
Been borrowed.
Borrowed.
Borrowed, okay.
From the
Oh,
resources from our
okay.
Be Smart friends.
I move we accept the resolution as written.
Okay. Motion by Susan.
Second.
Second by Chris. Or with you,
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Jamie? Okay. And so it is passed. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate all your dedication to this and persistence in making sure it gets throughout the community in different places. So, thank you.
back.
That's great. We will look forward to
We'll be in
it.
touch.
It's always nice to see you guys. So.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
All right, and I just want to, because we took some things out of order, I'm just checking back to make sure we did not skip over anything we didn't circle back to before we go into the items by consensus. Were people able to find the warrants this week?
Find what,
The
sorry?
warrants, in the items by consensus, the warrants. We had that that discussion in the meeting the last time. I just want to make sure that people were able to find them in the drive.
I did not.
Are they called warrants?
They are, so, I don't have my computer, so I can't pull my drive up to do it parallel, but you have access to the same. I'll get off that. Oh, yes. Is that what I wanted to do?
Can you copy the words from the agenda, like the payroll warrant, S2404?
Yes. Yes.
And paste into the search in the drive?
The pop, yeah. Thank you. Did you guys get that? Into the school committee, the Google Drive.
Mm-hmm.
If you copy and paste the payroll warrants from there, if you want to look on my agenda here. Those.
You're fine.
You look?
I'm seeing it.
Okay, good.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't know you were
Oh,
waiting
no,
for me to
sorry.
confirm it, sorry.
Just want to make sure you're
Yeah,
able to see it. Okay, is there somebody, well, first go into, you can do
I
your
have to
spiel.
say.
Yes.
As superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
Okay,
So moved?
motion by Susan,
Second.
second by Chris. Chris, we'll start with you.
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
On the yes. Jamie? Okay, it is unanimous. And then that moves us into adjournment. Is there somebody who would like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Chris.
Second.
Second by Susan. Chris?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
On the yes. Jamie? And Jamie's yes. We are adjourned at 8:34. Thank you all who were able to tune in and be here in person. Our next regular meeting is on July 11th. It will take place here at HCAM at our usual time. And then on July 25th, we have a scheduled meeting that actually will take place in the day. Thank you all. Enjoy the beginning of summer, and we will be reconvening at some point in between, potentially now and then, but we'll be in touch for offline for that. Thank you.